Just like peanut butter and jelly, chips and salsa, or in the sports world, the Browns in finding another quarterback, or the Cowboys in coming up short in the playoffs, there's a lot of great and iconic duos in the world, almost too many to count. But today, though they're not as iconic as a peanut butter and jelly, we're going to be breaking down the top 10 to 15 duos here in the NBA today. If you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. On the road to 10,000 subs. Trying to hit that by the end of the new year. So if you enjoy, tell a friend to tell a friend. Starting off here with my honorable mentions. As far as my criteria, I think it's fairly simple. The majority of my rankings are really what have you done for me lately? Because that is, again, the world of sports. What have you done for me as of late? But really, I didn't go back farther than the bubble, and I really just went back to the bubble for two teams specifically. I think you can pick up which two teams I'm mentioning. But to start, in a great duo, you need to have two talented players. Ideally, two players that fill each other's voids, because again, a strawberry jam does not it doesn't taste as good as grape jam on a peanut butter jelly, at least in my opinion. So again, you need two players that ideally make the perfect duo. However, if two players like my number 10 duo are just that skillful, if they just have that much outright skill, that could outweigh the success of other duos on this list, or if they didn't make the list. If that makes any sense, we'll talk about that as we go on, as a couple of occurrences where the the skill of the duo might just outweigh the success of others. But then if it was close, if it was a 1A, 1B situation, and I couldn't really decide on which duo would I rather prefer, it really came down to playoff success. Even if one duo's been together longer, I gave the edge to the duo that has won more than the other, because at the end of the day, playoff success is what matters in the world of sports. But some honorable mentions here specifically for some of the younger duos. The Thunder duo with SGA and Chet, or Ant and Cat in Minnesota, or Paolo and Franz in Orlando. They're all three young duos that are having success this year and arguably should be on the list, but you'll see why they aren't in a moment. And again, a lot of those duos, it's their first or second year together. But then we have a lot of experienced duos that also have an argument for this list. And again, for all of these honorable mentions, if you want to have them at 9 or have them at 10, I have no problem. But if one of these duos you have in the top 5, let me know down in the comments. But we'll start here with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. It really just came down to Ja not playing at all this year. So that's the reason I kept them off, and I used this as an opportunity and a beacon to show some love elsewhere, and that's really what it came down to. But no doubt, if Ja was playing and he didn't get suspended, they would be here on my top 10. I just used that suspension to show love elsewhere. For Steph and Clay, or Steph and Dre, whoever you want to say the duo is there in Golden State, at the moment, it's really just Steph Curry, but they have an argument because, one, they have Steph Curry, and two, they won a championship in the last 3 years. So they definitely have an argument for the list, but I use this, again, as an opportunity to show love elsewhere. Zion and Brandon Ingram, Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, and Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. All of those are great duos, and again, if you have them in your top 9, top 10, I don't have a problem with it. I'm not going to argue with you, but of course, let me know if you have any differences in your list. But my honorable mention, and I'll be honest with you, I had this at my number 10 spot for some time, but my honorable mention is the Detroit Pistons and losing basketball games. So yes, I did make a graphic just to kind of show some light on how bad this franchise has been. As you see, the graphic kind of speaks for itself. Since the 2009-2010 season, the Pistons have a record of 415 and 713. They've lost 63% of their games. I mean, it's got to be abysmal to be a Pistons fan. I mean, right now they're 2-20. They've lost 19 straight, unless they played last night, which is probably means they've lost 20 straight. This is a Pistons team that it just doesn't make sense why they're losing at the rate that they are. They have the young talent. You think that right now some of those guys are going into their second, third years. You would think they're ready to take that jump like the Orlando Magic and make a run for the playoffs. Not to mention, they just got Monty Williams, a coach that took a team to the Western Conference Finals and to the NBA Finals in just the past couple of years. You would think that with the veteran head coach and all the young talent ready to take that next step, that this franchise and these players would be winning more basketball games. Well, that's just, obviously, as you see with the graphic, that hasn't been the case. Right now, they're the worst team in basketball, and I guess their only real wins have come in this team's only real wins came in like the first week of the season because they started 2-1 and they've lost 19, 20 straight games. So I hope for Pistons sanity and Pistons fans that they can eventually turn us around. But again, as a Browns fan, I feel the pain of a franchise that is trying and trying and trying. I guess just not hard enough, or at least they're not good at trying. So to me, honorable mention, Pistons and losing. Again, a little bit harsh, but the NBA might need to step in and assign some different front office positions like they did with the Trust the Process Sixers back in the early 2010s, so we can get this Pistons unit on track on the winning side of things for once. But then at number 10, we do have Luka and Kyrie, and this is one of those cases where the outright skill of the duo outweighs their success. I'll start by saying these are two of my favorite players of all time. And I know it's early, but of all time. And that's not why I have them at number 10, maybe partially. But again, throughout this list, you can get the edge over another duo based on one or two things. More skill or more success as a duo, as I've mentioned multiple times. This duo is probably peanut butter and peanut butter because this duo definitely lacks defense. In every sense of the word, they lack the two-way ability that you would love to see. And to me, the just lack of defensive ability does keep them lower on this list than others because I like a more complete duo. But we can't deny the offensive excellence that they display on a nightly basis. Kyrie just did go down with an ankle injury, so shout out to Kyrie. Hopefully, a speedy recovery back to the court. But to me, this is a top 3 offensive duo in the game, skill-wise. And this is their first full season together. Of course, they were paired at the deadline last year. So, of course, they're going to be lacking some postseason success. I'm just excited for this postseason because Luka is continuing to improve, and we didn't even think that was possible. He just had a triple-double in the first half the other night. But I do think if fully healthy, this team can make a run, and I think even at the deadline, they might be buyers to bring in some more wing depth. So I'm excited for the Mavericks this year, and again, they always have a chance if they have 77. At number 9, we have the Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid duo there in the city of brotherly love. Simply put, this duo has 2 top 10 MVP favorites at the moment. That's how great this duo has been to start the year. However, what held this duo back was a technicality, and again, you could be mad at me about this. I've seen some people have this as a top 3, top 5 duo. They're just not on my list because, again, over the last couple of years, this duo has been James Harden and Joel Embiid, not Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. And, again, that's not to diminish the contributions or the talent or the great games that Tyrese Maxey has put in that span of time with James Harden, but it's different when you're in the top 2, when you're the guy and not a guy. For example, it's like saying the great duo of LeBron and Kyle Kuzma won the bubble ring for the Lakers and not LeBron and AD. Or you could say like Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant won all those multiple rings for the Warriors, not Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. It's not that those third options are bad players. They're just not the guy, right? So hopefully you guys understand. I think it's just a different ball game when we're talking about a top 2 option to that third or fourth guy on the pecking order, right? But again, small technicality, but I think they're in a position to make a deep run. But this duo specifically, as the two, have not achieved anything together. So skill-wise, they made it here, but as far as success, they're lacking in that department. At number 8, we have De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. Light the beam. This is one of those duos where I didn't know where to put them. I wanted to put them higher, in all honesty, but I don't know why I just couldn't. Regardless, you can argue that this duo is one of the less skillful duos on this list. Kind of like, you can argue that they're less skillful than Luka and Kyrie, which are at my number 10 spot. However, last year, this duo achieved very notable success for their franchise. It's not every year that a duo can be put together and then they end a 17-year playoff drought for a franchise. One of the longest in current American sports history, and this duo of De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis did that. Sabonis is like a walking triple-double when he decides to be. De'Aaron Fox is averaging 30-plus right now, and he's playing his best career basketball as of right now after coming off of that MVP-level season from last year. Yeah, to me, if Steph Curry didn't go out there and have 50 points in the Game 7 matchup last year against this Kings team. This Kings team had the Lakers number. They could have made a run to the Western Conference Finals. I don't think they would have had a chance against the Nuggets, but I definitely think it could have been fun, and we'd be in a different position talking about this duo if they could make that run. But again, I think if Steph didn't have 50, that's a big what-if for Kings fans. But at number 7, we have a potential duo, and not that these guys are not paired up already. It's really just we know the potential of this duo. They just haven't been healthy. But no doubt, health has been the biggest enemy of the Paul George and Kawhi Leonard Clippers era, as it is with all Clippers duos. But the one postseason that we do have as of note, when these guys were both healthy and playing their best basketball, was in the bubble year. Their first year together, they made the second round of the playoffs, and they were up 3-1 on the Denver Nuggets. But then the Denver Nuggets and Jokic kind of had a come-out party, and they ended up coming back and winning that series. Paul George, by himself with Kawhi Leonard out with injury, Paul George has had a couple notable runs. He brought this team to the Western Conference Finals, I think in 2021 against the Phoenix Suns, and they almost won that series. And then Kawhi Leonard, last year without Paul George, he put up a fight and took a game off of the Phoenix Suns, and he was so dominant that we were like, this Clippers team might have a chance to beat the Suns without Paul George. So we know this duo has, 2 top 10 to top 15 players in the world, but we're just waiting for these two to be healthy at the same time in the same postseason, at least just one more time on the same team, because we know that these are two guys that can put up 30 points, but they can also lock down your best player on the other end. There's not a duo that has more elite two-way ability than this duo here. However, again, the skill is here with this duo. The health is just the biggest question. And unfortunately, that's, the bad reality of sports. But in the postseason this year, I think if they're both healthy, I think they can be a good team. I do worry about James Harden and Russell Westbrook. But Tyronn Lue is trying to do a lot of different dynamics and schemes with that pairing right now to get this team playing at their highest level. But the team needs to run through these two guys on your screen here. At number 6, we have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Just like the Sacramento Kings, this might not be the most talented duo, but there's very few duos, at least in recent memory, that have had this level of success. As Jimmy Butler and Bam as a duo, aside from getting the NBA championship or an NBA Finals win, they've done pretty much everything else. As dating back to the bubble year, they have 2 trips to the finals, including one of the greatest playoff runs in NBA history from last year, and then they also have 3 trips to the Eastern Conference Finals in that same span with 2 Game 7s. So to me, maybe not the most talented. Maybe Luka and Kyrie have this duo as far as an overall talent perspective. But again, success outweighs if it came down to a tiebreaker. And to me, with Bam Adebayo, he's a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Hasn't won it yet, but I think he can here pretty soon, or hopefully, right? And then Jimmy Butler, of course, we know he's an all-star level player, and in the playoff time, he's an all-NBA level player. So we know when the playoffs come, this duo turns that switch, and they quickly remind us that, hey, we're a 6th seed, but we're still one of the best teams in the NBA. But each and every year, this duo figures it out, and they always play at an increased level come playoff time. And again, not many duos have had this amount of success in recent memory. So shout out to Jimmy Butler, shout out to Bam Adebayo, as year in and year out, they continue to fight. At number 5, I know, Giannis and Dame, Freak Time, which is their famous duo name. They've only played 20 or so games together, but this is the anomaly on this list, and no pun intended, right, with the channel name, and of course I associate with that word. But just like Luka and Kyrie, this is a duo that doesn't have real playoff success together, but they're so talented that it was hard for me to leave them off the list. For starters, this duo has maybe the best basketball player in the world, depending on who you ask, in Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is running for MVP and Defensive Player of the Year every single year. He's on pace to be an all-time great, and I'm not saying a top 75, I'm saying top 10 level. That's the pace that Giannis is at to finish his career as one of the best to ever do it. But then you add on this hungry, peak of his game, maybe, version of Damian Lillard. This duo is scary. I think this is a duo that is a perfectly fit and combined duo, where all of Dame's voids are filled with Giannis's strengths, and vice versa. So again, I think they fit each other's games in every way possible. And I think, again, it is a complete duo. This is that peanut butter and that grape jam on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Just the absolute perfect pairing, right? But they're one of the few threats to the Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics this year. Even a couple weeks back when they were struggling to start the year, I still had them as contenders because I know the potential of this team. They still have a guy, Chris Middleton, who is not playing his best ball right now, but we know he can turn it up at a certain point in the season. Brook Lopez, he struggled to start the year, but he's starting to turn it around. I do worry about their head coaching when it comes to the playoff time and adjusting because they've struggled to do that this year, but that has nothing to do with today's video. For Dame and Giannis, I think as a duo, they're top 5 with the potential to be number 1, and let me make that clear. They can be number 1. I just want to see at least one playoff run out of these two. At number 4, we have LeBron and AD, and I don't feel great about this one. Let me know. Do I have them too high, too low? But the resume is up there from a duo perspective, as they have, for starters, 2 top 75 players of all time. And that's not, in my opinion, that is, of course, to the actual NBA itself. But in their time together, starting in the bubble year, which is 4 or so total years, they've had 3 playoff appearances. They're 6-2 in playoff series. They've won 62% of their playoff games. And, of course, they won the 2020 NBA Finals. So they have 1 title, 3 playoff appearances, and they're winning 60% of the time. To add to that list, as of just a week ago, they have the first ever in-season tournament championship. So that goes to their credit as well. This is a duo that has an argument from a skill perspective and, of course, the resume perspective, which I just read off, as this is a duo that's going to be a contender yet again this year. And so far, the Lakers do look good, especially as of late with moving Austin Reeves to the bench, and D'Lo is playing some pretty good basketball. The only reason they're not higher to me is because of the inconsistencies with Anthony Davis. And I know he just put up 40 and 20 in the championship game, but whether it's his health or with the fact that he's day to Davis or every other day Davis, this is just a guy that we know he should be a top 5, top 10 player on a yearly basis. And we know that LeBron has been trying to hand over the keys to this team, so to speak, for about 3 years now. Anthony Davis just hasn't been, I don't know if he's not ready or if he's just not that caliber of player, because some people aren't, to take over and be the best version of himself on a nightly basis. We just haven't seen that yet. At least we don't see it often, right? We see it every other day, it seems like. But for me, Anthony Davis, we know the talented player he is. But when it comes to playoff time for this duo, and that's really what it comes down to these last couple duos, when it comes down to a must-win scenario, I think this team's going to rely on a 39-year-old LeBron James more so than a 30-year-old Anthony Davis, who should be, again, a top 5 player in the league. Regardless, again, I know they are, one of the best duos in the league. They're one of the most accomplished duos as far as right now in the NBA based on the resume. And they have an argument from a skill perspective or a resume to be number 1 on this list. So let me know. Do I have them too high, too low? Of course, a lot of these spots are interchangeable, especially in the top 5. At number 3, I have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And talk about interchangeable. There is not a duo that I shifted up and down this list more than Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Because on the surface level, this duo has it all. They have 2 all-NBA caliber players, 2 elite two-way players, and an every year MVP candidate in a guy like Jason Tatum. To go with that, I mean, they have the skill and they have the playoff success together, as they just haven't won the Larry O'Brien. But it's still worth note that they've had multiple Eastern Conference Finals runs. They made it to the finals against the Golden State Warriors, and they should have been to 2 finals if 2018 LeBron didn't exist. So this is a duo that has accomplished a lot together, and I don't know if they've ever missed the playoffs in their time together. So again, they win the most, and they win at a high level. They just haven't got that ultimate prize, that number 1 spot. But maybe, I don't know, maybe for the fact that this is one of the longest tenured duos in the NBA, that we're harder on them, and we kind of downgrade the success that they've had in the playoffs. But again, only 2 duos on this list have won an NBA Finals, so I'm not going to downgrade it like most people would. I'm not going to downgrade this duo. They were almost number 2 for me. But again, just due to not, I guess, getting the NBA Finals, puts them on an even playing field with other or other duos. Another duo that I really like in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And again, this might be premature and this might be an anomaly to have them this high, this early. But this is one of those cases where the overall skill in a duo outweighs the lack of achievements. And this duo hasn't even played a full year together. And that's dating back to last year. But they're still top two because they have two top 10 players in the game of basketball today, in my opinion, right? In my preseason rankings, I listed the top 50 or so players in the NBA. With honorable mentions, it was close to 100. But I had Devin Booker's the 10th best player, and Kevin Durant is like the 5th or 4th best player in the NBA. I believe in this duo that much. And even in the less than a year together that they've had, they still were the only duo in the playoffs to take 2 games off of the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series, which no other team did. So even in the short time together, they did something no other team has done. But simply put, there's no shutting down one of these guys. You can't shut down Devin Booker, and you can't shut down Kevin Durant, let alone both of these guys on the same team. And for that reason, they're one of the best, and they're one of the most feared duos, at least for the time being. This Suns team is still winning without their third best player. And to me, I think they have a real argument to be the favorites, if you want to say that, in this postseason, because they have 2 guys where you can't shut them down. But now, I do want to say this. Should I have had a more accomplished duo like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, or LeBron and AD, maybe even Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo? Should I have had one of those more accomplished duos ahead of them? Sure, you can make the argument, but again, sometimes in lists like these, talent just outweighs certain achievements. And there's only one duo that's lower on this list from 3 to 10 that's won an NBA title. There's one duo that I left off this list that's won an NBA title in the Splash Bros. So again, as far as talent, I think it outweighs certain achievements. And for the simple fact that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't have that Larry O'Brien, or Butler and Bam don't have that Larry O'Brien, I'm going to give the edge to the more talented duo overall in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And at number 1, we have the Jokic, Jamal Murray, Denver Nuggets stack. Do I need to explain this one? I mean, reigning NBA champions, 16-4 in last year's playoff run. And prior to that, they had a deep playoff run after deep playoff run. It's, again, best pick and roll in the game. It's headed by an all-star level guard in Jamal Murray, who is heavily underrated. And hopefully one day he's given the recognition of an all-star. But again, we might not see that for some time because he is currently injured, or he just came back from an injury, excuse me. But then you also have the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic in this duo, as he's a guy that currently leads the league in points, rebounds, and assists as a 7-foot center. Right now, that is absolutely insane with how much skill we have in today's game. Maybe the most ever, you can argue. But Nikola Jokic, best player in the game. He's playing at an all-time level, and he looks like the clear frontrunner for MVP at the moment. This is a team that's going to make another deep playoff run. They're struggling right now, but again, they have the depth, and they're going to be prime buyers at the deadline to improve this unit. I think clear-cut number 1 duo in the league, and this is a team that's going to compete for another title in the near future. So that is my top 10. Again, let me read through it as we had Luka and Kyrie, Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. We had PG and Kawhi at 7, Butler and Bam at 6, and then in the top 5, we had Giannis and Dame, LeBron and AD, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Kevin Booker sounds like an elite player in the NBA. And then Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. So that is my top 10. But moving over to a new segment where if you follow me over on Instagram, which if you don't, it's at the Anomaly Podcast _. Over there, I always, give you guys little fun games and stuff that I bring to the show. So if you're interested, go ahead and check us out over there on Instagram. But basically, this last couple weeks, I opened up a form. So I opened up a Google Sheets or Google Form, whatever it is, and it's basically free for the public. So if you want to go there and if you want to drop a question, a scenario, or even a hot take, go over there and I have the instructions clearly laid out on a pin post, and you just follow the instructions, and then you could drop a question. And each and every week, I'm going to bring them to the show. So for this week's Q&A, we have 3 questions. So shout out to you guys. This one comes out via Blackwing, which he's a longtime supporter of the show. And he says, who's at fault for the Cavs' inconsistencies this year? I've seen a lot of fire JB or Spida is gone talks, and just curious what you think the issue is for a team that was just in the playoffs. As a Cavs fan, I have this one first because, again, I believe we're both Cavs fans here with Blackwing. But again, I think it comes down to JB Bickerstaff, and I think it comes down to our young stars not taking a big enough step to take that next level as a team, as we're kind of just playing at the exact same rate as last year. Darius Garland, I'm saying, and Evan Mobley. Sure, have they made minor improvements to their game? Yes, of course. We want to see that in our young players. But to me, I think it really just comes down to those guys not taking a big enough leap for a title contention tier because, look, we know we can make the playoffs. We know we can probably compete with a team or two in a playoff series. But we know come second round, nobody's going to take us seriously, and we're not going to be able to compete with a Giannis and Dame. We're not going to be able to compete with a Boston Celtics, maybe even a Philadelphia 76ers, or even a Miami Heat team. So to me, I think it comes down to those guys not taking a big enough leap in their game as far as impact. And it really, the team really right now just relies, here Donovan Mitchell, go get us 40 and go win us this game. If Donovan Mitchell can't do that, which on most nights he does, because Donovan Mitchell is Donovan Mitchell, we end up losing. And, that's how we fell into a big hole early in the year. Not to mention our defense has not been on the level as it was as of last year, because last year we had the number one defense. Right now we're middle of the pack. I will say, though, I do think we have the talent and of course, enough coaching. I'm not a big JB Bickerstaff fan. I wouldn't mind firing him, in all honesty. But I think we do have enough talent where we can turn this thing around. We've won a couple games as of late, and I do think we can finish the year as a top 4 seed in the East. But again, just like last year, we might be a fraud 4 seed. So to me, it comes down to the secondary guys not taking a big enough step, and of course the poor coaching decisions and rotations and everything that JB Bickerstaff does. I'm just not a big JB Bickerstaff fan, if you're not picking it up what I'm laying down. The next question. Now that we've seen 10-plus games in the James Harden and Clippers era, what do you think their ceiling is? And, I've seen this question floating around a lot, and to me, I'm happy you brought this to the show, D, but to me, I think their ceiling is, if everything goes perfectly, and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are healthy, and James Harden and Russell Westbrook stick to this plan that Tyronn Lue currently has where, when James Harden runs a unit and then Russell Westbrook runs a unit. They never played together. I think if they keep that philosophy and Zubac can be okay, maybe this team can get a decent option at the deadline, preferably a big. I think if everything goes right for this team, I think a Western Conference Finals trip makes the most sense. I just don't know if I can trust them to beat a Nuggets team. I mean, I know they have the talent, but it's just those two guards where I don't know if I can trust them to win big-time games in big-time moments, Russell Westbrook and James Harden. So to me, I would say Western Conference Finals. I don't know if they can beat the Suns, and I don't know if they can beat the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series, even at full health, just due to those guards. And to me, well, also Zubac, as he's, of course, not going to be guarding Jokic at all. I think Western Conference Finals, if everything goes right, but shout out to Tyronn Lue. As a Cavs fan, he was here, and he was one of the most underrated pieces to that 2016 Finals championship. And again, in my opinion, maybe he's the best head coach in the league. If he's not one, he's two, behind Eric Spoelstra. So shout out to Tyronn Lue. If you want to come back to the Cavaliers, we would greatly appreciate that, right? And then final question here, and I think this is actually the question I had the most fun with, as this question comes out, We know that Zach LaVine's going to be traded, but do you think another big star could be traded at this year's deadline? And where to, if so? And I cuts off there, but to me, look, we know Zach LaVine's going to be traded. It's just a matter of when. As Zach LaVine had some nagging injuries to start the year, this Bulls team was underwhelming yet again this year. And again, they've been winning without Zach LaVine. and a report just came out that Zach LaVine has a toe contusion or something like that, where he has soreness in his right foot or something. It's a very small injury. Again, it could be true, but most likely it's made up or exaggerated. And this is an injury that's going to keep him out, ironically, until that January 15th deadline where players can be traded. So to me, Zach LaVine is going to be traded, whether if it's at January 15th or at the deadline. And again, we just don't know where. It could be the Knicks. It could be the Miami Heat. It could be the Lakers, right? It could be a plethora of teams. But at the same time, there's also been reports that Zach LaVine doesn't have a big market like we think he should. Regardless, I think, of course, Zach LaVine will be traded. But let me get back to your question. As you say, what other trade could be what other big star could be traded? So I'm assuming you mean like an all-star level player. And one comes to mind kind of immediately, as let me throw this out there. I could come out here with the basic answer of a Pascal Siakam or an OG Anunoby. But to me, I think a star that could be traded that's very underrated, an all-star from last year, is Lauri Markkanen. A guy that, again, former Cavalier, but also an all-star last year with the Utah Jazz. I think this is a guy that is a prime candidate to get traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder don't necessarily need the three-point shooting with guys like Isaiah Joe and Lou Dort's a respectable shooter, and Chet Holmgren, of course, can knock it down, as well as, of course, Shea. But I think Lauri Markkanen is perfect for them, as the Thunder don't have a big cap room, or they don't have a big salary filler right now. So I think Lauri comes in, even with his salary for the next 2 years, they can afford to pay him that. So I think they can afford to pay him $20+ million the next 2 years, and the Thunder have like 27 picks over the next couple of years. So just throw a first in a couple seconds, or 2 firsts to get Lauri Markkanen. Bring him in. He'll bring in that much-needed shooting, whether if it's starting or off the bench, most likely in the starting lineup. But I just think that's dangerous, and I think it's going to be a very underrated move, because people don't look at Lauri Markkanen and think superstar. I don't either, but I think he's a very underrated star in this league. And to me, I think Lauri Markkanen next to Shea, he's going to give him that much-needed spacing. He's really just going to be playing that Kristaps Porzingis role that he does for the Boston Celtics for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I think Lauri Markkanen, for a couple picks, maybe they want to go Josh Giddey with the recent allegations and a couple picks. That helps out the Jazz because they get Josh Giddey, a young star who, if he clears allegations, could be a nice building block, and again, could be the point guard there. And they also get some draft capital for a one-time All-Star. So I think it works out for both sides, and I would say Lauri Markkanen to the Thunder is going to be my other big star that could be traded. But that's going to do it here for today's video. Again, if you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm talking a little bit too fast here. But again, if you guys do enjoy, subscribe, help us get to 10,000 subs. That is the goal by the end of the new year. But again, if you want to get involved in these weekly Q&As, check out my Instagram, which is linked in the description, of course, or it's on your screen now. And until tonight we're dropping our week 15 waivers for fantasy football. Fantasy playoffs are here, and it's the most important time of the year. So if you're interested, 6 o'clock, tune in. That video will be out maybe even earlier, depending on how often you check the channel. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy. Get out of here.